Hello there, people and listeners of the Hungry Podcast. Today, I'm absolutely fizzing with excitement to welcome Charlie Bigham onto the podcast. I do think Charlie, much of the listeners think Charlie really did sort of pioneer the challenger brand movement back in 1996, and we all kind of look up to you as the kind of the pioneer of it. And your meals really do. They almost have this ability to put a smile on people's faces. And yeah, I'm just so grateful for coming on today, Charlie.
Brilliant, Dan. Very nice to meet you.
So kind of where I want to start first is this obsession is my secret ingredient. Now, I was doing some research pre to this, and it was a campaign you ran earlier this year. Now, it's well documented that in 1996, you kind of went pre-1996, you went traveling, left your management consultancy job, and you had the idea for Bigham's in a camper van. But where I want to go, I almost want to rewind it back further to potentially your childhood. Was there a specific moment when you became obsessed with cooking and food?
No, I don't think you can pin it to a moment, but I kind of think, food is a wonderful thing. Food is a wonderful thing. And I think I guess I was lucky in that, when I was brought up, my upbringing was all about, we always sat down as a family and had meals together. We used to go holidays to the west coast of Ireland, and a sort of big part of just life and whether it was on holiday, especially actually on holiday, was kind of, the culmination of every day was sort of sitting down and having a big dinner and eating food and laughing and chatting and that was the kind of central point of the day. And I think, as I sort of reflected and then kind of when I was a student, it was always about getting people together and eating, drinking a bit, but eating as well, always actually the better evening. And sort of, I guess it struck me, as I sort of set up the business and kind of thought about what I wanted to do in food, kind of actually everything that's important in life happens around food, and the big occasions of food, when people are born, when people die, when people get married, there's always food involved. It sort of brings us together. And so, kind of at a high level, food is pretty important to us beyond just its nutritional value. But then, of course, that's a big part of food. But then everything is just, it's just a wonderful area of topic. Whether it's shopping for food, cooking food, the alchemy of cooking is extraordinary. How you can take an ingredient, a simple onion, and make it taste, like 6 different things, just how you prepare it. And then, kind of, I've been, I don't know, I feel hugely lucky. I've been doing what I've been doing now for 25 years, and every week I discover something new and interesting and amazing about food. It's a sort of endlessly fascinating subject, and obviously a subject that we're all in touch with. I'm sure if I set up a business selling widgets, there'd be something I'd be discovering about widgets, which I might find fascinating, but nobody else would. But, kind of, we're all invested in food. So, when you find something fascinating about food, then it's not too boring when you come home in the evening and chat to your family and say, God, this is what I was doing today and I found out this. Or you go out and meet some friends. Everyone's fascinated about food. It's just it's an amazing, wonderful subject.
And what are some recent, I suppose, learnings or things you found out about food in the last couple of weeks, I suppose, or months?
Oh gosh, now you're going to put me on the spot. You see, that's what you're.
Sorry, Charlie.
What you have to do, Dan, and I haven't kind of thought of that. I don't know what I found out. I was reflecting yesterday. I was sitting having lunch with some people at work, and we were, as you do, talking about food. We were talking about cheese. And just, isn't cheese an amazing thing? Isn't cheese an amazing thing? That you can start with one ingredient. You can start with milk. And then you can turn it into, you know, I mean, how many different cheeses are there in the world? I mean, there must be, you know, tens of thousands of different cheeses. And you know, if you go from a cheddar to a Gruyere to a, you know, to a camembert to a brie to, yeah, they've all started with this thing called milk coming out of a cow. It's just extraordinary. Just extraordinary. So yeah, I mean, so I don't know, and it's kind of even if you're not discovering things, you're just sort of sitting and having these conversations. You think, God, that really is amazing that all of that variety can come from that one single ingredient. I'll have to think of something, Dan.
No. It's but what I've kind of gathered from that is what you said. You know, it's the alchemy of cooking, and it's the constant curiosity, which I think does evidently spills into your business with like the NPD you bring out. But I think it does stem. We're kind of the same at Moneylife. Like everyone, you know, at lunch, all we're talking about is have you eaten here? Have you eaten here? It's like I'd completely agree. Food does. It's almost like the nucleus of all kind of, I don't know, social interactions. Food brings everyone together. And yeah, no, I think it's the curiosity that comes from food, which makes it so delicious, you know, literally and sort of metaphorically. Where I want to go now is there's a great video on your website talking about your journey, and in it your wife Claire says, you know, as a student, Charlie was quite experimental in the early days. We always used to go around to his flat. And then you say, I used to make it up as I went along. Can you kind of, just to set the scenes for listeners, because I think lots of listeners will be making their product in their kitchen right now, and they'll be looking, you know, you've now got this amazing, well, two amazing sites. They're kind of, it's a moonshot goal for them. But I want to kind of go back to what it was like when you were making it in your flat. Like, what were some of the dishes you were making, and kind of how can you like remember what you were like tinkering with back then?
Well, I'm always tinkering. I mean, I'm not a chef, but I am a cook, and I love cooking. And I'm quite, I'm not really a routine person. So I don't particularly like cooking the same thing twice. I mean, obviously I do a bit because, you know, sometimes you just want to food quickly and, oh, well, I know that's good, so I'll do it. But for me, the sort of real joy is opening the fridge and finding almost nothing in it. And thinking, shit, there's, you know, 6 people for supper tonight, but there's nothing in the fridge. That's a nuisance. What am I going to cook? There's nothing to cook, and kind of being forced into being slightly creative, and then you can kind of conjure something out of an unprepossessing set of ingredients. And I enjoy that challenge and the creativity of that, and it doesn't always work. It doesn't always work, but sometimes. No, actually, I'd say kind of once you just sort of throw yourself into it with sort of confidence and enthusiasm, you can almost always rustle up something pretty good. So I enjoy that, and I guess sort of going back to answer specifically your question, Dan, going back to the early days. I am a cook, but I kind of realized early on that if I was going to have a kind of proper food business, I could be the enthusiastic amateur in the equation and be encouraging and inquisitive and, you know, and you know, taste things and all of that and you know, add in my bit. But I did need some proper expertise. So the very first person who joined me was a lovely professional chef called Spike. Chef to his toenails, and he was brilliant, and he was with me for the first 6 or 7 years. And yeah, he was just a great chef, and chefs are just unbelievably talented, you know, people. They just know how to do things. I learned loads from him, and so the first dishes were you know, they were more his than mine. I mean, and you know, in terms of inspiration, but then we kind of refined and worked them up together. We had an absolutely delicious dish, which the Cajun chicken was one of our early dishes. It was lovely. It was a kind of, what was it? It was chicken legs and thighs, I think, rubbed in Cajun spices, and they had this kind of lovely, rich sort of marinade and spiced. And then we did it with we made this delicious Very easy to make. I can recommend it. A fresh mango and red onion salsa. Basically, a Brazilian mango cut into small squares, mixed with fresh coriander chopped up, very finely diced red onion, a little bit of garlic, olive oil, salt, pepper. Absolutely fantastic. Brilliant on a day like today. The sun is shining.
Yeah.
We want to be getting out the barbecues and you know, that salsa with a little bit of spicy chicken. That'll get the special day.
Oh no, definitely. And so you hire Spike. So you come back from India, you hire Spike. Like what was the timeline from you getting off the plane in India to hiring Spike is what I'm trying to work out.
Well, I did a little bit when I came back because I'd gone off and I'd been a management consultant before and kind of thought, well, I'm not that good at doing that. I'm really terrible at working for other people and being told what to do because I kind of have my own ideas and don't like being told what to do. So I better work for myself and shit, what am I going to do? And food would be great because I love that and it's a big market. So I'll do food. But I'd never worked in food, knew nothing about food. And so I thought the first thing I better go and do is get a bit of cheese under the fingernails and work in a food business. So I went to work in a lovely delicatessen just off the Portobello Road, sadly no longer there, but it was a legend in its time called Mr. Christian's. And I worked there for 4 or 5 months, just sort of getting the feel of food. And it was great. God, I learned a lot there. And so probably it was about 6 months after we got back from our travels that we kind of, you know, started fiddling around on the kitchen table, met lovely Spike, and then off we went.
Amazing. And in those early days when you like, how long did it take? Because I know Waitrose was your first kind of bigger listing. Correct me if I'm wrong, but kind of the way I'm looking at it now is, and one of the questions from one of the listeners actually was like, how did you get consumers back then to pay more or less like kind of double the price, but without them actually trying the product? Do you see what I mean? Is because that to me is like is what you've done there seems, yeah, I don't know how you guys have done that.
Well, good question. And the answer is we didn't. I mean, we didn't charge double the price, but also we got people to taste the food.
Right.
So, you know, there's this great mystique that setting up a business is an impossible thing. And, you know, I don't know, you need to know everyone. I don't know. People think it's really hard. It's not very hard, especially if you're doing something really straightforward like food. I mean, food is just one of the most straightforward businesses. So, yeah, made a few things on the kitchen table, went, you know, got out there, knocked on some doors of some shops around London and said, here, we've got this food, have a taste. We think it's pretty good. If you think it's good, why don't you put it in your shop? And it's kind of that simple. And they, you know, and it was a bit different what we were doing, and the food was great, and it was sort of packaged in a slightly different way and a slightly different proposition. And, you know, London it was then 25 years ago, is today a wonderful, place for anybody doing something new and innovative, because there's lots of people, you know, I'm very fortunate to live in one of the great cities of the world. And one of the things that happens in great cities is people are always looking for new and interesting and different and take risks. So, you know, I was fortunate, lots of people, quite a few people who own shops took a risk with me. And then sort of part of the thing was, wow, but no one's going to understand what it is. And it's like, well, that's okay. We'll come and set up a little cooking stall in your shop and we'll just do it. You know, we'll make it in the day and we'll come in at 6 o'clock in the evening and we'll cook. So that's what we did. You know, me and Spike and Claire, my wife, you know, we'd sort of busily chop food and make food and all that sort of stuff during the day. And then it would come to the evening and it would like pile in our little van and drive off somewhere and set up shop. And it was brilliant because actually, I mean, it was quite nice for the customers because they got free food, but it was even better for us because, of course, when people are tasting food, they tell you everything you're doing wrong. You know, they're a bit polite, but they only need to be needled a little bit. And they say, how could it be better? And you start to get sort of gold dust feedback. And you know, obviously very quickly you realize you've got most of it wrong and that you've got to change it all if you're going to have any hope at all. But that all happens very, very quickly.
No, that there's so much to kind of dig dig into there. I mean, I think the first thing is it's reassuring for listeners that, you know, you yourself, Claire and Spike were doing the grunt work. I think a lot of people want to kind of potentially package a product and just get it straight into a supermarket. And it's like, that's just, you've got to really iterate and test and do the kind of the small things, but those things fundamentally, when you get them right, eventually can scale. So I think that's super reassuring. But what you said there about, you know, food is straightforward. I personally overcomplicate a lot of things, right? And I think lots of kind of my peers who are starting out do overcomplicate things. When you said food is straightforward, what do you think founders potentially overcomplicate at the beginning, or kind of waste too much mental energy on?
Well, I think people think it's really difficult. I mean, of course it is a bit difficult, but you kind of, if you just say, I'm going to do it, you just do it, and you just one thing at a time. And, you know, if somebody slams the door in your face, you just have to sort of push it back open politely, and, you know, all of that. So I think people sort of get overwhelmed by the fact they've got to do all these different things. You know, you've got to make the food, and then it's got to be, you know, you've got to understand all the technical aspects of it, because I don't want to make somebody ill, and of course you don't. And then I've got to get the packaging right, and how do I do that? And then I've got to get the sales bit right, and how do I do that? And how about the equipment? And how about the, how about the marketing? And how about, oh my God, this is just too much? And how about people? How do I employ people? And of course, you just have to sort of break. You know, there is a long list of stuff to do. You just have to get a bit organized about it and say, you know, it's just 100 small tasks, and they're all simple. And just sort of have a plan to work through them quickly.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And it's fine.
And I think, I suppose, if you're super passionate about it, that list is actually exciting. Whereas I suppose that list, when you're doing your management consultancy job, would have been like, oh my God, this is hell on earth, right? So
yeah, like, I think it helps to be able to take the step back and be organized about it, and, you know, put everything into a spreadsheet and kind of say, okay, I'll do this then and that then, and you know, and I mean, there are different people who do it different ways. I mean, I sort of went the sort of old-fashioned way, started on my kitchen table at home with very little money, you know, and sort of basically lots of graft from me and others, and minimal money, and we just sort of, you know, somehow muddled our way through. There is another alternative, which is you go and raise a bit of money from somewhere, and then you kind of you spend that money, you know, wisely, hopefully, but quite fast, and you employ experts to make doing some of these tasks easy. So you can kind of either go the cash or the graft route. I think I went the more of the graft route, and that does mean one of the things, if you do that, is you have to do all these jobs that perhaps you don't really like, you're probably really bad at, but you can't afford to pay someone else to do them, so you just have to learn how to do them. You know, so I did, for the first 2 or 3 years, I did all the accounts. I mean, I'm not an accountant, but guess what? You know, accountancy is not very hard. You know, simple accountancy. And then as you go on, you think, God, I'm actually really I'm not enjoying doing the accounts. I'm probably not really very good at it. And then at some point you employ an accountant and you realize how really terrible at it you were. And that's quite good, you know. But actually it's quite good now that, although, you know, I've got a very brilliant finance team and a fantastic finance director, but, you know, because I've sort of done it in my sort of amateur way at some point, it means I can kind of find my way around the numbers of the business, probably certainly better than if I had never done it. And that's been quite useful.
That's so, because I think again, what listeners often say is like, oh, I immediately need to find a co-founder who's like, I'll do the sales, someone does the ops. And it's like, that's kind of in the zeitgeist of, I suppose, of early stage brands. But actually what you're saying there is, no, go and learn it yourself, so when you come to the stage you're at now, you've got that kind of literacy in areas that you may not particularly like, which I think is super, super important. Back on the feedback piece, because again, when I was doing some research, what I loved on your website is you've got this feedback page, and it's like, where did you buy it, and like, give us your honest feedback. So there's almost this kind of constant almost obsession with feedback, right? And I think it's really important to get feedback. Lots of people want to shy away from it because they don't want to be told their product's a bit shit potentially. In the last kind of 26 years, what would you say has been the best piece of feedback you've either received on a dish that has then kind of had like a cataclysmic shift in the business? Or yeah,
just gonna close the door. Hang on, Dan. Don't go away.
No worries.
I think kind of like most things, it's not one big thing. It's not, you can't just say, oh, there's one thing. I get, at the moment, we get maybe 200 emails, phone calls, letters a week from customers. I read every single one. They come in every day. That's what I've been doing early this morning, is just seeing what people said last night. And everyone is valuable. Everyone is valuable. And kind of, we take that feedback very seriously in terms of, it's amazing that people and brilliant that people have taken the time and trouble to write that email, make that phone call, write that letter. And, it's just amazingly valuable to us, that feedback. And so, I write a letter back to every single person who writes to us. And then we look very, very, very carefully at that feedback. And, sort of slightly more than 50% of that feedback is people very nicely saying how lovely our food is, or how delicious, or how it's really helped them in, at a moment in their life. And that's lovely. That's obviously fantastic to share with the team and really motivating to us all in the business. But then the criticism, when people are writing in and asking a searching question, or saying you haven't got this quite right, there we do sort of, we cut it and analyze it. The trends in that is obviously one comment on its own. You have to be careful of that, can kind of lead you in, send you off down rabbit holes. But even if you get three people saying the same thing, you kind of, immediately that you've probably got something slightly wrong that day, and we can go and work out what that is and dive into it. And it's that feedback that we get is probably the greatest kind of source of change in our business and source of improvement, I would say.
For sure. And it's just kind of to play devil's advocate there, I suppose, is that say you've got like 100 people saying this dish is, say it's with Thai red curry, for example, is absolutely outstanding. And then you've got, say a slight trend saying it should be different. Like, how do you absorb that potentially, or how do you not get distracted by that potentially bad feedback or criticism from then potentially disrupting the dish that could piss off the 100 who absolutely love it? I'm just trying to work out how you kind of process that feedback.
You get the feel for it quite quickly, in terms of, there's always going to be some people just saying, I don't like it. And that's, of course, there are going to be some people who don't like it, because we're all a bit different and we all have different tastes. And that's something, it's something not to be fearful of, that not everybody likes everything you do. It's kind of, that's just, you've just got to suck that up. But if you get 20 people writing into you and saying this dish is just too spicy, and one person saying it's not spicy enough, it's probably too spicy. I mean, that's not rocket science, is it?
Yeah, no, for sure. It's just interesting, because I think we get some bad comments on our peanut butter, right? And it's like, should we really listen to what those guys are saying, or should we kind of stick to our guns and keep doing what everyone's telling us to do? So it's interesting how you read every single it goes back to that obsession thing, right? But you read every single piece of feedback. I think that's, you're kind of completely in the business still, which is insane. And I suppose that kind of leads on to the like how you've built the Bigham's sort of culture and people within the team as you've kind of gone from that one-man band doing everything to this huge organization. Now, I was watching a video, and correct me if I've butchered the pronunciation of this, but I think is it Dulcote and
Dulcot.
Oh, there you go. Dulcot. It's this great video, and I implore listeners to go and watch it. It's on your website, and you're kind of in this almost looks a bit, what's the word, like medieval, like you're giving this speech to the team, and you say, want to make extraordinary food, extraordinary people, and absolutely extraordinary place to work. And there's two words I want to latch onto. The first is obsession, and the second is extraordinary. So how do you think your obsession builds an extraordinary place to work and extraordinary brand, I suppose?
Well, I mean, I'm sorry, to be boring, Dan, but it's kind of, I'm going to say kind of what I said a moment ago. It's not one thing. There's this sort of cliche, you don't make, if you want to make 100% difference to something, you're probably not going to do that by taking something and making it 100% different. The way you're going to make it 100% different is to make 101% changes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
So it's a cumulative thing. And I think that's all, maybe when we talk about obsession, that's kind of what we are obsessive as a business, and it's about the detail. It really, kind of, and I don't think it's just a food thing. I think any business, whether you're making something or providing a service, you have to sort of get into the detail. And I'm really interested always when you look at other businesses and just look at the little detail that people obsess about, because that if you're obsessing, it's always about detail, and it's the detail that really sticks with you as a consumer, and it makes the difference. It makes the difference. So yeah, I think it's this cumulative thing, being really caring, and also, one of my mantras is our job as a business is just to get a little bit better, kind of every day, every week, every month, every year. And if we just keep doing that kind of forever, then one day we'll be quite a good business.
No, that's it's so true, and I think there's no silver bullet. I think everyone's looking for a silver bullet, and I like.
Yeah. I do think. Of course, there are rare instances where there's some moment of genius and something seismic changes in someone's business somewhere, but I don't think that's very often.
Yeah, for sure. And with kind of obsessing with the detail, what are some of the things you're looking into now, I suppose, like either this week, like this month, or going forward, where you are kind of obsessing to just get that maybe 1% better each day?
Well, it comes under lots of different headings. I mean, obviously, taste the whole time. We're saying, how can this be a tiny bit better? Are we cooking it right? Do we need to cook it for 5 minutes longer, 5 minutes shorter? Yeah. Have we got the right ingredient there? The kind of is the parsley coming from the right place? Should it be curly parsley? Should it be English parsley? Should it be flat leaf parsley? Can we, is that parsley, how much difference does it make whether it comes from England or comes from Spain? And kind of like, how do we work that out? How do we make sure we have it coming from, we actually think it's, parsley is all about freshness. So if we can get it grown by our English supply, we've got a lovely parsley supply. I'm kind of like, okay, they're growing it for us 10 months of the year. How can we see if we can stretch that to 11 months? And then what do we do about that tricky month when it's having to come from further afield and therefore less fresh? So you kind of get quite obsessed about a single ingredient. And we buy a lot of parsley now. So it's really, really important. It's one of the great, wonderful things as a business grows. If you choose to, you can kind of, lots of people think that growth equals compromise. Lots of people say to me, how do you make sure your food tastes as nice today as it did when you were small? And I'm like, that's quite weird. Actually, because we're bigger now, we've got more time and more resource and a little bit more influence with our suppliers. So actually our food shouldn't be as nice as it was 10 years ago. It should be nicer. But the reason traditionally that food becomes less nice or products become less good is because people get greedy and they say, actually, do you know, we're going to take the benefits of growth and we're not going to put it back into our product or service, but we're going to just put it into our back pocket. And I think that's wrong and short-sighted. So kind of it's this thing of reinvesting the whole time. But I mean, it's not just about taste, and it's not just about, I mean, really interesting, yesterday, Henry Dimbleby came out with part 2 of his food strategy. And I think it's, I think there's some really, Henry's a good guy who I've worked with in the past a bit. And it's kind of really, I think he's saying lots of sensible things, and we do need to question some of the things that have just become the norm. And I got an email yesterday from a customer saying, I don't understand why there's sugar in your fish pie. I read that and I thought, surely they must have made a mistake. Of course, we don't put sugar in our fish pie. We don't put sugar in any, well, almost any of our food. In our puddings, yes, but very little. So I kind of went and looked at our ingredients, list in our fish pie, and there is sugar in our fish pie. I thought, well, that's wrong. And the sugar is because we put some breadcrumbs on top of it, very, very small amount of breadcrumbs, which within the breadcrumbs there's a small amount of sugar. And that's because as a country, for years, it's just the norm that people, when they bake bread, on a big scale, they put sugar in it. And I'm kind of thinking, if I make bread at home, I don't have to put sugar in it. And there's some bread, if you're making a brioche, you put some sugar in, but most bread you don't put sugar in. So I kind of thought, and I had a chat with Rupert, our head of food, when this email came in, I said, "Come on, Rupert, this is wrong, isn't it? Let's, we probably buy enough breadcrumbs now that we can be fussy about this, and we can find someone who makes the breadcrumbs, the bread we want, and the breadcrumbs that we want, and let's not have sugar in our fish pie." So, there are these things that are just changing the whole time, and that's another lovely thing about food is it's not static. We are, as consumers, quite rightly, we are becoming more demanding, and we should be demanding about what we eat and how our food's produced and where it comes from. And that kind of, that is a challenge to us, but it's an opportunity, I want to engage with that. Of course I do. I don't want to have sugar in my fish pie.
It's just, and this is kind of what I wanted to get to in this kind of conversation was unpacking the process, because we just see these amazing, products on shelf, but it's so good to kind of work into, the sugar in the fish pie is such a great example. So you'll take that feedback, and then what are the next steps with potentially changing that recipe? Like, do you go to this? Do you have like a? So I watched on your Bigham's banquet thing, which I thought was brilliant. With would you go to Rupert, speak to him, or what is the sort of process?
Well, we'll pick up and we'll understand. We'll chat to our current supplier and we'll say, just can you explain why this is, and and it will take it. These things are never simple to fix, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't fix them. So we'll fix it. And I mean, by the way, obviously the amount of sugar in our fish pie is infinitesimal, because it's, there'll be sort of 1% sugar in our breadcrumbs, which make up probably less than 1% of our fish pie. So we're talking about, a sort of 100th% sugar in our fish pie. But that doesn't matter, and I mean, so if it's 100th%, but that's maybe where we are. I said it's making 101% chances. We're probably now having to make 1,000 or 10,000 100th% chances, if that adds up right.
No. It's just so interesting to see how it kind of works, like from almost within the Bigham's business. And where I want to go to now is kind of leadership. And lots of listeners will be are kind of in the stages you were when you just met Spike, with building business with Claire, doing the sampling sessions. You've now got a huge team, a huge business. How would you say your leadership has changed from, say, when you were managing a team of, say, 10 to what it is now? Like, what have been some sort of key changes in your behaviors as a leader?
I sort of, I'm not a great one for growing up, but in this regard, I hope I've grown up.
No, I love that. I think, yeah, we should all stay. I was speaking to someone this other day, all stay young. Yeah.
So I hope I've kind of learned a few things along the way and become, a better person to work with. I mean, that's what we should all be aspiring to. Early days, there were moments of mild stress. And so I do remember kind of in the first couple of years, occasionally kind of losing my rag with, actually, I don't think I've ever lost my temper with someone who works in the business, but with suppliers or, people or, other external people. And I remember about, I don't know, maybe 2 years in, just thinking, that's a really bad thing to do. You never feel good after you've lost your rag with someone. They feel awful. You've kind of, if it's a sort of relationship that you mind about with a supplier or whatever, you've crossed a Rubicon you can never go back from by having done that. And so actually just don't do that. So hopefully, that was in a kind of early lesson. Losing your temper is just, it's not a productive thing to do, I don't think.
Yeah, it's resentment only hurts the beholder of it, and it doesn't achieve anything productive at all. And when you were saying, like, in those early days, was there a moment which was like really challenging, where you were like, I don't know if I can get this off the ground? And when you were going through that challenge, like, what were you saying to yourself to propel you through that?
I think you have to, it's really, really helpful if you have quite a strong self-belief when you're starting a business. And I kind of think, you shouldn't let too much self-doubt creep in, because doubt is a dangerous thing. And so I don't think I haven't had any moments of despair when I thought, oh my God, I can't do this. I've always thought, okay, well, that's annoying. This is a blow. This is difficult. This is a problem. But okay, well, how are we going to fix it? And I think you do need that sort of resilience of, you're going to get, if you kind of start up a business, you're going to get knocked back a lot. And so you kind of just need to suck that up and get on with it. Not worry about it.
No, I love that. It's just accepting it's like it is. I think there's a kind of rhetoric now of like entrepreneurship being this really like interesting, cool thing to do, and people just want to do the cool bits but not accept the hard bits or the setbacks. But I think a pragmatic approach would be like, or a more pragmatic approach for listeners is like, accept it's going to be really, really hard, and accept there's going to be loads of challenges, but in that acceptance sort of becomes a bit of freedom, right? Because it's like, that's it.
But I think I would say you've got to even more than accept it. You've got to sort of be almost masochistic in enjoying the bad bits.
Really? What's been the baddest bit, or the hardest bit?
Oh, we've had some tough times when things have gone wrong financially. I mean, usually not in recent history, but going way back, just some internal mismanagement, mostly probably, ultimately down to me, not anybody else. But you kind of, when I say you have to kind of enjoy the bad bits, you kind of have to say, well, if something bad's happening, there's probably an opportunity in there somewhere. So you kind of learn to see the opportunity. And if there isn't an opportunity in there, there's definitely a lesson. And kind of actually, you should always enjoy opportunities and seeking opportunities. And you need to find a way of enjoying learning lessons, even if they're hard lessons and painful lessons, because actually, you know, that's kind of part of life.
And what have been some of the biggest either painful lessons you've learned along the way that have then kind of set you up for future successes?
Well, I think is, you know, if you've taken the approach that I have, with kind of basically trying to, you know, do the whole at every stage, trying to, you know, not be profligate with money and be spending other people's money, but always think of it as your own. I think it probably means there's almost an inevitability that you will find yourselves at times actually doing stuff yourself which you're not qualified to do, not good enough to do, or have kind of got people maybe in the team who've got left behind. You know, we've been fortunate, we've been quite a fast growing business, and you know, on average our business doubles every 3 or 4 years, and not everybody can keep up with that in, you know, in terms of ability. It means things get, you know, significantly more complicated over time, and some people can come on that journey and they can grow and keep up with that pace, and others can't. And you've kind of got to be, you've actually, I think, where it's really, really hard, that I think one of the hardest things of all, I would say, in running a business is having that conversation and saying to someone, it's time to move on. And anyone who's run their own business, or even not run their own business, being a manager and being responsible for people, you know, those conversations are awful, because you feel bad. And actually, usually the person who's having to give the news, look, it's time to move on, thinks about it a huge amount and worries about it and hates that moment when the conversation comes. I eventually, and I hated that, and I still don't like it, but I reconciled myself to it when I realized that actually almost the worst thing you can do is have someone sitting in a job that they're not quite capable of doing, because that's a really miserable place to be. And sometimes it's to do with the capability, and other times it's to do with fit. I remember I had a lovely guy on my sales team probably 15, maybe 20 years ago, and he was a great guy. But anyway, he wasn't working out, and we asked him to leave, and it was painful, as the conversations always are. Called Matt, and he called me up about 3 or 4 years later, and he rang me and he said, "Charlie, I just wanted to say thank you." I said, "Matt, nice to hear from you. I haven't heard from you for a couple of years." He said, "I just want to say thank you for thanking me." So, okay, well, that's quite a strange call, Matt. And he said, "Yeah, I was just in the wrong job, and you kind of saw that before I did, and you asked me to move on, and I kind of moved into a different industry, and I suddenly found myself in the right job, and everything fell into place, and I've had a great time since. So thank you."
That's such a good way of looking
And
at
I think it's kind of interesting that, you know, and it was amazing that he called me to say that. But it is really, really tough. It's really tough sitting down and saying to someone, "I'm sorry, it's time to move, time to go."
Yeah, no, for sure. But just for listeners who are hiring in the early stages, and they you know, you do make bad hires. We've made bad hires at Money Life. How do you navigate that? Or what advice could you give them to navigate that conversation?
I think you've just got to you've got to be honest. You've just got to be honest, and also you've got to be principled about it. You've got to be, you know, if you start a business, you are going to have to say goodbye to people. You know, you've got to accept that. You know, don't kid yourselves. You know, you'll make some wrong hires. Some people won't grow at the pace the business does. And you've just got, that's just part of what you're signing up to. So you might as well have a plan for it. And I think the important thing is to have some core principles you stick to. And I'm not just talking about how you treat, how you deal with saying goodbye to people, but some core principles about how you run your business. And so, honesty, respect, generosity, if you have, say, those three as three of your core principles, then when you say goodbye to people, you say, well, okay, let's make sure we apply those principles in this difficult conversation. Let's be honest and generous and respectful.
And what are the value or the principles or values you've got at Bigham's? Are there those three? Is there anything else? Or?
Well, there are quite a few. We're actually just in the process of sort of having a look. We've written them down at various points, and they've merged a bit. So they're not really in a state of flux. The expression of them is in a state of flux because it's kind of interesting every now and again. But we have our sort of principles at the moment. Respect is one of them. Collaboration is another. Pride and passion is another. Daring, we like people to take risks and be daring. And I think and then we kind of like to set ourselves goals, and
No, but it's always coming together now, making sense of it. It's like everything is always, as you said at the beginning, tinkering. Like you tinker with the product, with the sugar of the pie to the values or the principles of the business. I think for listeners, it's constantly be iterating, constantly thinking like, how can this be better, or how can I do that little bit? And I love that. I'm learning so much there, and I think it's amazing. I'm just conscious of your time, Charlie. We've got about 6 minutes till 10.
Yeah.
So I'll just wrap up with some quick fire, basically.
Yeah, cool.
So the first kind of question I've just pure curiosity here, but like, what is your favorite Bigham's meal you've made over the last 26 years, and I suppose why?
A few years, we have a fridge at work. We encourage everyone to take our food home and eat at home, because that's kind of, then we get people properly knowing what we're making. And a long time ago, I'd sometimes go to that fridge and I'd open the door and I'd think, I hope that recipe's not going to be in there, or see a recipe in there and think, oh, that's a blow, I don't want to take that home. And I thought, this is madness. These have all got my name on. If I don't want to take it home, why is it in our fridge? So, one of those stupid moments, I kind of thought, this is just stupid. Everything in our fridge, I've got to want to take every recipe home. I've got to like everything we make. And if I don't like it, we're not making it. So I like every single one of our recipes. As a result.
What was the dish that you didn't like that was in there?
Oh, I've forgotten those ones. They're forgettable because they're horrible. Well, they weren't horrible, but they weren't up to scratch. So, so I'm not going to talk about the things I don't like.
Yeah.
And genuinely, because there were a few which were just like, just not good enough, basically. And so no, I like all of our recipes now. And we've got, and in terms of trying to pick one, it's like there's a different thing for a different occasion. It's a hot summer's day today. So today wouldn't be the day I'd choose to eat our lovely boeuf bourguignon with dauphinoise potatoes. But, roll the clock forward 6 months, sitting in a miserable, cold, wet day, that would be perfect that day. Today, well, maybe our lovely paella would be great today, Glass of rosé, paella.
Sounds absolutely insane, especially when the sun's finally coming.
So there's a sort of different dish for different occasions and different moods, and
No, definitely. And the next question is, if you were to start Bigham's again tomorrow, what would you do differently and why?
Not a single thing.
Not a single thing, because
because life, life should not be about regrets. I think there are two really unhelpful things in life, kind of emotions. I think regret is one and guilt is another. And I think if you kind of get into trying to rewrite history, you're acknowledging regret. Does that make sense? You're kind of saying, oh, I wish I hadn't done that. I'd have liked to do this instead. And I don't think that's healthy, and I don't think that's right, because what's happened has happened. And it's important that bad stuff happens because you learn from it. So I would hate to go back and rewrite history and say, oh, can I take out all the difficult bits and all the bad bits, all the bits that made me uncomfortable? Because actually they are part of the tapestry of how you got there. And you can't, you just can't do that. You can't say, I'll only have the good bits in life.
I love that. Yeah. I love that. What I've learned from this is kind of just 1% better each day, and just accepting it's hard, I think is a great couple of lessons for listeners to take away. Final question, kind of, I suppose, back to the listeners here is, what do you think is the kind of some of the questions founders are not asking themselves that they should be in the early stages, that if they did ask those questions, they'd scale faster?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily about scaling faster. I think there's sometimes too much emphasis on growth above everything else. I kind of think values and principles. I don't think people in the early stages are strict enough with themselves on those, because those are the foundation stone of your business. And it's kind of really worth bothering about those early on and setting the behavior in yourself and in your team to say, those are, you can polish them and rework them and reword them, but you can't change them. So it's kind of write those down early, think about them carefully, and then make sure everything you do as your business grows, is aligned with those principles. And if that means you grow a little bit less fast, that's fine. Because I think we have this obsession in this country. There's this unhealthy obsession about start a business, grow it as fast as you can, sell it. Those are not the great businesses on the whole, I don't think. The good businesses, the great businesses, are the businesses that think with a long-term view, and they're not thinking about the exit as they start. They're thinking about, how do we have an absolutely amazing product or an amazing service, and how are we going to do that over the long term? So I'd say kind of think carefully about your values and principles, and always think for the long term. Don't be distracted by the short term.
No, that's amazing, because I think that you're so right. Everyone's just, we're the same. My life, to us, it's like grow as fast as possible, and I think that it is dangerous. And I think you're the perfect exemplar of someone who's done it, slow, long and slow, but with this obsession with constantly just trying to get a little bit better each day. Charlie, that was amazing. Thank you so much for coming on. I really do appreciate it.
Very nice to chat to you, Dan. Have a great day.
You too.